I never expected to need a roommate again at 29. After breaking up with Mariah and moving out of our apartment in Portland, I landed in a smaller city 2 hours south called Lexington. It was quiet, a little off the grid, just the kind of place I thought I needed to reset. The rent was lower, the people less in your face, and there was this weird little charm to the tree-lined streets and ancient brick buildings, still marked with faded logos from the 60s. I found a 2-bedroom above a coffee shop on Main Street. The apartment was older but clean, and the landlord, Joe, was a retired firefighter who smoked more than he talked. After paying first and last month's rent, my savings were dry. That's when the idea of finding a roommate started making more sense. I posted an ad in the local classifieds group on Facebook. Just a few sentences. Looking for a clean, respectful roommate to split a 2-bedroom apartment in Lexington. Ideal for students or quiet working professionals. Rent is $600 per month. DM if interested. Within hours, someone replied. Her name was Mara Densley. Her message read, "Hi. My name's Mara. I'm 26, just moved back to Oregon from Colorado, going to school for wildlife biology and working part-time at a taxidermy studio. Weird, I know, haha. I'm quiet, respectful, and clean. I love old horror movies and hiking. Would love to chat if the room is still available." I clicked on her profile. Mara had this messy blonde hair that fell around her shoulders like dried straw, big green eyes, and a crooked but genuine smile in most of her photos. One stood out, a picture of her between 2 other people, a guy and a girl, both holding up peace signs. The caption read, "Love my crazy roommates." It felt like a good sign. We video chatted later that evening. Her vibe was chill, not overbearing. Soft-spoken. She talked about taxidermy with a weird kind of excitement, but it didn't come off creepy. Just niche. By the weekend, she'd Venmo'd me her half of the deposit and arrived with a U-Haul and her friend David, a lanky guy with glasses and a flat-brim cap who helped haul her stuff up the narrow stairs. She had a full mattress, a bunch of Tupperware bins, and one big gray cooler with bungee cord strapped over it. Things were normal. For a while. We got into a rhythm fast. She had classes 2 days a week at the nearby community college and worked at this tiny taxidermy studio a few towns over. I was working construction weekdays and helping my cousin with freelance carpentry jobs on weekends. We didn't see each other a ton, but when we did, it was chill. Grab a beer, talk about dumb childhood cartoons. One time we stayed up till 1 a.m. arguing about which Goosebumps episode was scariest. She never brought people over, never made noise, paid rent early. At that point, I thought I'd lucked out. About 3 weeks in, I came home to find Mara and David dragging a brand new freezer through the front door. "What's that for?" I asked, stepping around the cord trailing from the box. Mara wiped sweat from her brow. "My boss gave me this old freezer from the shop. Figured I could keep some extra specimens here so I don't have to drive out there every time I want to work on something." She paused. "That okay?" I didn't know how to answer at first. It felt weird. But she looked at me with this mixture of hope and guilt that made it hard to say no. I nodded. "Just, maybe keep it in the pantry?" "Of course." That night I walked past the pantry and heard the low mechanical hum of the freezer already running. I didn't look inside. I figured it was better not to know. A few days later I had the house to myself. It was a Sunday. I woke up late, made coffee, and scrolled on my phone until I was hungry enough to make a sandwich. When I opened the fridge, it was warm. The light inside didn't come on. The microwave clock was blank. Power outage. I checked my phone. Nothing from the landlord or utility company. I flipped the kitchen light switch. Dead. Great, I muttered. I figured Mara would have said something if she were home, so I knocked gently on her door. No response. She was probably at school. I grabbed my keys to go check the breakers downstairs, and as I passed the pantry, I slipped. Caught myself on the counter edge, heart slamming into my throat. I looked down. A thin trail of blood was leaking from the edge of the freezer and forming a sticky pool on the tile. My breath caught in my chest. I stood there for several seconds trying to convince myself it was just animal blood. Just part of her work. But something didn't sit right. And then I noticed it. A new padlock on the lid. That hadn't been there before. I left the kitchen, grabbed my toolbox from the hallway closet and pulled out a small pair of bolt cutters. My hands were shaking. It was like my body already knew what my brain didn't want to accept. Snap. The padlock fell. I opened the freezer. The smell hit me like a gut punch. Rancid meat, ammonia, something like mold and rot soaked into old carpet. I gagged and stumbled back, barely catching the edge of the trash can in time to vomit into it. It was bad. Once I recovered, I reached for the gloves under the sink and carefully started pulling bags out. The first few were small. Birds, maybe? One looked like a fox, curled tight like it had frozen in mid-scream. But then came the big bag. A thick black contractor bag knotted at the top with red zip ties. Blood dripped steadily from the corner. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a human head. Bloated. Pale gray skin. Eyes open, filmed over like wax. A black tongue pushed past cracked lips. I dropped the bag and stumbled backward, hit the floor hard, and crawled away from the freezer like it might come alive. I called the cops from my car, parked 2 blocks away. My fingers couldn't even dial right. I kept mispressing the buttons, my ears were ringing. The police came fast, taped off the apartment, took me downtown. I was still shaking when I sat in that gray interrogation room, a blanket around my shoulders. I told them everything. The ad, the freezer, Mara. The detective was a no-nonsense woman with crow's feet and a notepad full of tiny scribbles. "Did you ever notice anything strange before this?" she asked. I told her about the time I stubbed my toe making a sandwich, and Mara appeared out of nowhere in the kitchen doorway, just standing in the shadows. How she'd stared at me like something was wrong. And then it clicked. She didn't come out because I made noise. She came out because she thought I'd opened the freezer. The room spun. I was sweating. That was 2 days ago. The detective came back later with a photo in a plastic evidence sleeve. She set it in front of me without a word. I felt my stomach drop. It was a picture taken in our apartment, not one I'd ever seen. Mara stood in the foreground, grinning. But behind her, propped up in the chair by the window, was the head from the freezer. The same waxy, lifeless face. And behind it, written on the wall in dried blood, were the words, "Love my roommates." I never thought I'd end up living in a place like Wilcrest Apartments. It was a cheap 2-bedroom walk-up on the east side of Denver. Nothing special, but it was all I could afford after moving out of my parents' house and juggling night classes at community college with a part-time warehouse job. I moved in with Tyler, a guy I had known since high school. We weren't best friends or anything, but we played on the same soccer team, shared some classes, and both needed a roommate. He seemed like the quiet, keep-to-himself type, which I thought would work out fine. In the beginning, it actually did. Tyler was polite, paid his half of the rent on time, and never brought anyone over. Honestly, he was a bit of a homebody, always in his room, gaming or watching movies. We had a few beers together on weekends, but mostly kept to ourselves. It was easy. Maybe too easy. Looking back, there were red flags I chose to ignore. Like how Tyler always kept his door locked even when he was home. Or how I never once saw him bring groceries in. But somehow he was always in the kitchen late at night. I chalked it up to him ordering out or eating cheap frozen dinners. But everything changed the night I got off my double shift at the warehouse. It was just past 9:15 p.m. when I finally climbed up the narrow stairs to our apartment, exhausted, sweaty, and starving. The second I opened the door, a wave of something foul smacked me in the face like a brick wall. It wasn't just bad, it was suffocating. I stood there in the dark living room for a moment, frozen, blinking, breathing shallow through my mouth. The smell was thick, putrid, and rotten like garbage left out in the heat. Or something worse. Jesus Christ, I muttered to myself, flipping on the lights. I immediately walked toward Tyler's door, which was, as usual, shut tight. I rapped my knuckles on it, trying to stay calm. "Tyler? Bro, you in there? What's that smell, man?" No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Hey, dude? You good?" Nothing. This was weird. Tyler was almost always home by this time, and he never ignored me when I knocked. I stood there, hand still on the door, debating if I should just walk away. Maybe he had headphones on. Maybe he fell asleep. But the smell, it was getting to me. I leaned in close, my face inches from the old peeling white paint, and called out again, louder this time. "Tyler, come on, man. Open up." Still no response. I wasn't the confrontational type, and I figured I'd be pissed too if someone barged into my room without asking. So, I forced myself to back off. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and plopped down on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety building in my gut. An hour passed. The smell got worse. I sent Tyler a text. "Hey man, you home? Did you spill something? Smells like death in here." No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. That was weird. Tyler never let his phone die. He was always glued to it. I stared at the blank screen, biting my lip, my heart picking up pace. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but something in the back of my mind whispered that this was far from normal. By midnight, the smell was unbearable. I tried opening windows, spraying Febreze, but nothing touched it. It was like the apartment itself was rotting from the inside. I finally cracked. I couldn't take it anymore. "Tyler, if you're in there, I'm opening the door," I shouted, my voice shaking more than I liked. No answer. Screw it. I wasn't going to sit in that stench another second. I grabbed the spare bobby pin we kept in the bathroom drawer. We had a habit of locking ourselves out of rooms, and started fiddling with the cheap lock on his door. It took me longer than I expected. My hands were sweaty. The pin kept slipping. Finally, the lock clicked. I pushed the door open and immediately gagged. The smell hit me full force now, a tsunami of decay and filth. I coughed, backing away instinctively, tears stinging my eyes. The room was dark except for the pale glow of Tyler's computer screen, still on, still logged in. I flicked on the overhead light, bracing myself. The first thing I noticed was the closet door. It was shut, but the smell was clearly radiating from there. It was almost like I could see the stench curling under the crack at the bottom. Heart pounding, I edged toward it. My hands trembled as I reached for the knob. The moment I pulled it open, I knew this was something way beyond my worst nightmares. There was a black trash bag on the floor. The bag was bloated, oozing dark fluids onto the cheap carpet, and poking through a tear in the plastic was a paw, a dog's paw, covered in matted fur, stiff, swollen. I stumbled back, tripping over Tyler's desk chair, almost falling. My stomach lurched and I barely made it to the kitchen sink before vomiting. What the hell was this? I wiped my mouth, pacing the room like a madman, hands on my head. What kind of person keeps a dead dog in their closet? Had Tyler done this? I didn't care if it made me a snitch. I called 911. My voice cracked as I tried to explain what I had found to the dispatcher. I must have sounded like a lunatic, rambling about the smell, the bag, the dog. Cops showed up in minutes. They made me wait outside while they entered the room. I sat on the curb, trembling, sweat soaking through my hoodie despite the freezing Denver night. When they came back out, their faces said it all. It was worse than I thought. They confirmed it was a pit bull, beaten to death. The injuries were brutal, and from the state of decomposition, they estimated it had been in there for at least 2 weeks. I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, clutching my knees, rocking back and forth like a broken toy. They tried to keep me calm, asked me about Tyler. When I told them I hadn't seen him all day, they put a warrant out for his arrest. But Tyler never came back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. I packed up all my shit and moved out the next morning. Broke the lease, left half my stuff behind. I didn't care. I wasn't staying there another second. For months after, rumors swirled around town. People said Tyler had disappeared, that he was hiding out, that maybe he was dead too. I didn't care. I blocked him on everything, deleted his number. The Tyler I thought I knew, the kid I shared snacks with in algebra, who crashed on my couch playing video games, that person was dead to me. Maybe he always had been. Sometimes late at night I still wonder, what if I hadn't opened that door? What if Tyler had come home while I was there? Would I have ended up in that closet too? It haunts me, because the truth is, you never really know someone, no matter how long you've known them. Even your closest friends can have the darkest secrets locked behind their doors. And sometimes, the smell is the only warning you'll ever get. I was fresh out of high school, a milestone that should have felt like a victory, but instead it was clouded with uncertainty. The summer of 2018 had arrived, and while some of my classmates were already planning their gap years or heading off to college, I had a different vision in mind. My goal was simple: get my own place. Independence, freedom, the dream everyone talked about when they were young. I had spent the last 2 years working part-time jobs, saving up every penny I could. I had accumulated about $10,000, enough to afford a small apartment in a quiet part of town. The place I found was an old building just down the road from the high school I'd graduated from. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom unit on the first floor, but it was mine. It was close to everything I needed: the grocery store, a few local parks, and even the bus stop to get anywhere else. Plus, I had a group of friends who lived in the same building, and that felt comforting. I wouldn't be alone, and I'd still have a sense of connection to the world I was just leaving behind. I'd been looking forward to this moment for so long. I could already picture myself sitting on my couch eating takeout, watching movies without anyone judging me, enjoying the simple joys of having my own space. The first week went by smoothly. I was adjusting to the new life, feeling the freedom and the peace I had been yearning for. But as the days passed, things started to get a little complicated. Aaron and Rob, two of my good friends from high school, lived just a few floors above me. They were in the same building, but they hadn't been around as much before. That changed quickly. At first, they'd come down to visit me occasionally, and we'd hang out. Nothing crazy, just the usual. But as the days passed, they started spending more time at my place. First, it was a few hours, then it became an entire day. And soon enough, they were practically living with me. I had my limits. As much as I loved my friends, I was an introvert, and I had been looking forward to the solitude of living on my own. I politely asked them to leave one night after they'd overstayed their welcome. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I kept it casual. "Hey guys, I just need some alone time. Can we call it a night?" At first, they didn't seem to understand, but I was firm. "Please, I need some space," I repeated. They left, but something felt off. The next morning, Aaron came knocking at my door with an apology that didn't feel genuine. "We got evicted," he said, "and we don't have anywhere else to go. Can we crash at your place for just a couple of weeks? We'll get everything sorted." I didn't want to leave them stranded, and truth be told, I felt bad for them. So I reluctantly agreed. "Fine, 2 weeks. But that's it. After that, you need to find somewhere else to stay." 2 weeks stretched into 4, then 2 months. It became impossible to ignore the growing tension in my apartment. The once peaceful space had turned into a chaotic pit of noise, alcohol, and strangers I didn't know. Aaron and Rob brought people over almost every night. Sometimes just a couple of friends, but other times there'd be a full house, drinking, smoking, and partying until the early hours of the morning. I was too nice to tell them to leave again. Every time I brought it up, they brushed me off, claiming they were working on it, but I could see the truth. They were taking advantage of my generosity. I wasn't living my life anymore. I was living theirs. And then one night, everything changed. I had just finished a long day and was hoping for some peace, but it was impossible to relax. The loud music, the drunken laughter, it was a constant. After trying and failing to ask everyone to quiet down, I snapped. I marched out of my room, angry and frustrated, and ordered them all to leave. Every single one of them. It was no longer about being polite or respectful. I needed control over my own space again. I don't care if you're staying here or not. You all need to leave now. I'm not asking, I said, my voice cold and firm. It took almost 20 minutes to get everyone out. Rob and Aaron were stubborn, and it felt like they weren't leaving without some kind of fight. But eventually they did, and I was exhausted mentally and physically. I went to bed praying that the nightmare of constant noise would end. When I woke up the next morning, everything felt hazy. I had a headache and a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. Groggily, I stumbled out of my room and went to the kitchen. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, but when I turned the corner, my heart nearly stopped. There, on my couch, were Aaron and Rob. "Hey man, what's up?" Aaron said casually, as if it were just another normal day. "Are you kidding me? What the hell are you two doing here?" I snapped. "We're not going anywhere, bro," Rob said. "Chill out." I stood there frozen for a second. A rush of anger and confusion flooded over me. How had they gotten in? Then it hit me. The spare key I'd given them when they first moved in. It was still with them. Furious, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I wasn't taking any chances anymore. The police arrived quickly, but by the time they did, Aaron and Rob had run off. They knew they'd crossed a line, but I wasn't sure what they were planning. I had no idea if they'd been waiting for me to let my guard down, or if they'd always been this manipulative. That night, I was a wreck. I barricaded my door, locking all the windows and doors. I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't gone for good. I sat on the couch watching TV, hoping the night would pass without incident. But at around 10:30 p.m., just as I began to relax, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door handle turning. My heart raced. I knew what was happening. I didn't even hesitate this time. I called the police again, even though I was scared to move, scared to make a sound. I stayed silent, holding my breath as they knocked on the door. "Bro, let us in. We're sorry, man. We're freezing. We won't mess up this time. Just let us stay for one last night and we'll be out." Aaron's voice rang through the door. Something in the way he said it felt wrong. The apology felt hollow, fake. I could hear it in his voice. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't let them in. Not after everything they had done. The police arrived shortly after, and this time, they were able to arrest them both. What they found on them was chilling. Drugs, handcuffs, an illegal firearm, knives, and even a roll of bondage rope. My blood ran cold when I thought about what could have happened if I had let them in. I got a restraining order against them and had the locks changed. I thought that would be the end of it, but something about the whole situation still felt off. These weren't just my friends anymore. They were strangers. Dangerous ones. I had dodged a bullet that night. Literally. Since then, I've been more cautious about who I let into my life. I never touched alcohol again, the taste of it now forever tainted by that night. The entire experience left me questioning how well I really knew people, how easily trust can be shattered, and how quickly someone can turn from a friend to something far worse. My apartment was never the same after that. Even after moving on and starting fresh, the fear of what almost happened stayed with me, lingering in the back of my mind. And every time I hear someone knock on my door after dark, my heart still skips a beat. I thought moving in with a new roommate would be the perfect way to start fresh. After a messy breakup that left me with nothing but heartache and the end of my lease looming over me, I was desperate for a change. The weight of my failed relationship had become a suffocating reminder of everything that had gone wrong, and I needed to escape. So when I came across an ad for a room in a vintage 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The apartment was charming. Hardwood floors that creaked just enough to give it character, with a small balcony overlooking the city. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, a testament to the building's age, and the windows let in the kind of natural light you could only find in old, well-loved places. The price was decent, and the area seemed peaceful. It felt like I could finally breathe again. Megan, my new roommate, was quiet and a bit strange. I'd met her briefly during our initial meeting, and although I couldn't put my finger on it, something about her seemed off. She had these dark circles under her eyes, almost like she hadn't slept in days. Her gaze was intense, her stare lingering just a moment too long, but I was willing to overlook it. She seemed nice enough, and the apartment was too good of a deal to pass up. The first night in the apartment, I unpacked my boxes, trying to settle in. As I set my things in my new room, I heard it, the faintest sound like nails scratching against the walls. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate, as if someone was gently dragging something across the plaster. I pressed my ear against the cold wall, straining to listen. Was someone on the other side? I pulled back, thinking it was just the building settling. Old houses did that, right? Still, it gave me an uneasy feeling that I couldn't shake. I brushed it off, convinced my nerves were getting the best of me after all the emotional stress of the past few weeks. The next morning at breakfast, I casually brought it up. "Hey, do you ever hear weird noises at night? Like scratching sounds?" I asked, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. Megan looked up from her tea, her eyes meeting mine, unreadable. "It's an old building," she said, sipping slowly, almost too slowly, as if she was savoring the moment. "They make sounds." I nodded, trying to ignore the discomfort that crept up my spine. She turned her gaze back to her tea, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her cup. I wasn't sure, but something about the way she was acting felt off. Days passed, but the strange noises didn't stop. I started to notice more oddities. One evening, I was in my room, and I saw them. Tiny, almost imperceptible holes in the wall. They were small, too small to be anything of consequence, but they were placed in odd spots. One directly across from my bed, another near the bathroom. I stared at them, trying to make sense of it. What kind of holes were these? Curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed some tape and paper, covering the holes to block whatever might be peering through. The next morning, however, the coverings were gone. The holes seemed wider, like something had been tampering with them during the night. My heart sank, a cold feeling washing over me. Something was wrong. I felt violated. I confronted Megan that morning. "Did you remove the paper I put over the holes in my room?" My voice was steady, but inside, my mind was racing. She looked up from the kitchen counter, her expression blank. "Why would I go into your room?" she asked, her tone casual. "Maybe you imagined putting them up." I froze, staring at her. It wasn't like me to overreact, but something about her response didn't sit right with me. The way she said it, like she knew something I didn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. That night, sleep came fitfully. Every creak of the apartment seemed amplified. Every sound felt like it was coming from somewhere inside my own mind. Around 2 a.m., the scratching noise came again. This time, it was louder, more urgent. It moved along the wall, dragging and scraping. My heart raced as it stopped right behind my bed, as if it were just inches away from my head. I whispered into the dark, my voice shaking. "Who are you? What do you want?" A faint giggle echoed from the wall. It wasn't loud, just a soft, eerie sound that made my skin crawl. The next morning, I woke to find my closet door ajar. Clothes I hadn't worn in days were missing, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd taken them out. Hours later, they reappeared, folded neatly on my bed. A strange, cloying scent clung to the fabric, a mix of damp earth and something else. Something sweet, but rotting. I didn't know what to make of it, but it made my stomach churn. I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer, not with the growing sense of dread gnawing at me. I started staying out late, spending hours at a coffee shop just to avoid being home. One night, as I opened my laptop to distract myself, the webcam light flickered on. I frowned, moving to disable it, but before I could, an anonymous message popped up on the screen. "Why don't you want me to see you?" My heart skipped a beat. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Who is this?" I typed, my fingers trembling. No response. I slammed the laptop shut, the overwhelming feeling of being watched creeping up my spine. I gathered my things and rushed home, my mind racing. I locked my bedroom door, pushing a chair against it for good measure. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed, clutching a kitchen knife under my pillow. But sleep wouldn't come. Sometime in the dead of night, I felt it. A presence. My eyes fluttered open, only to find Megan standing at the foot of my bed. Her figure was a dark silhouette, illuminated faintly by the streetlights outside. "Megan?" My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. She didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on me. "You were screaming," she said softly, her voice oddly distant. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I didn't scream," I whispered, my heart hammering in my chest. "Please just leave." She hesitated, lingering for a moment longer before slipping out of the room. Her footsteps receded down the hall, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, I couldn't take it any longer. I had to leave. I began packing my things, determined to get out of there before nightfall. As I was going through a box of old clothes, a small flash drive fell out. I didn't recognize it, but I was too curious not to plug it into my laptop. The folder labeled "For Claire" was the only one on the drive. Inside were dozens of video files, each marked with a date. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the most recent one. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of my bedroom. I watched in horror as I saw myself sleeping, tossing and turning, my face contorted in some restless dream. The timestamp was from the night before. My breath caught in my throat as the camera panned across the room, revealing Megan standing in the corner. Her eyes gleamed unnaturally in the infrared light. My body went cold as I realized she had been watching me. I clicked on another file. This one was of me in the bathroom undressing for a shower. I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't just the invasion of privacy. It was the fact that she had been in the room while I was completely unaware. At the bottom of the list was one last file titled "Tonight." I hesitated, then opened it. The video showed a live feed of my room, but from the angle, it was clear the camera was hidden inside the wall. The footage shook, and a message flashed across the screen. "I'm coming." A loud thud echoed from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me as I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. The doorknob rattled. "Let me in." Her voice, distorted and almost unrecognizable, called from the other side. "I just want to make sure you're okay." I backed away from the door, gripping the knife in my hand, my heart racing. The door creaked open, even though I had locked it. Megan stood there, but something was horribly wrong. Her limbs were too long, twisted in unnatural angles. Her face was distorted, dark circles under her sunken eyes. "You shouldn't have tried to leave," she whispered, her voice low and guttural. I screamed, rushing past her and out into the hallway. I didn't look back. The scraping sound, the same one I'd heard from the walls, was now right behind me, chasing me, getting louder and more frantic. I reached the living room, but the front door wouldn't open. It was stuck. Megan's laughter echoed through the apartment, manic and desperate. Frantically, I grabbed a nearby chair and smashed a window. My hand cut against the shards of glass as I crawled through, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran into the night, not stopping until I reached a brightly lit gas station. The attendant stared at me, bewildered. "Are you okay?" he asked. I could barely speak, my words tumbling out in a blur. They called the police, and when they arrived, I told them everything, the cameras, the flash drive, Megan. An officer frowned as I finished. Ma'am, that building's been abandoned for years. My blood ran cold. No, I moved in last week. Megan is my roommate. The officers exchanged glances before one spoke up. We'll take a look, but the last tenant in that apartment was a woman named Margaret. She died decades ago. They escorted me back to the building. It stood there, dark and decaying. The windows were boarded up and graffiti covered the walls. Inside, dust coated every surface. My belongings were gone, vanished. The apartment where I had lived was nothing but a hollow shell of decay. But in the center of the living room, there was one thing that didn't belong. A vintage camcorder on a tripod, pointed at the door. A note was attached to it. I read it, my heart sinking. It was in my handwriting. Thank you for the performance. I stared at the camera, my mind unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The officers guided me outside, but I couldn't stop shaking. My entire world had just shattered, and I had no idea who or what I had been living with. It all started when I first moved to Oak Ridge, a quiet, modest town nestled in the mountains. I had always been the type of person who preferred solitude, but after my divorce, I found myself needing a change. The place was small but charming, and with the financial strain of starting over, I decided to share a 2-bedroom apartment with a woman named Sarah. I met Sarah through a mutual acquaintance. She seemed sweet enough at first, warm, understanding, and always willing to lend a helping hand. I had no reason to doubt her, especially after the emotional wreckage my divorce left me in. Her gentle demeanor and constant smile felt like a balm to my shattered heart. She was a nurse, so I knew she could handle emergencies. I thought we would be fine together. 2 women in our late 30s, each with our own baggage, finding comfort in each other's presence. At first, everything went smoothly. We shared meals, talked about life, and even had lazy weekends watching movies. It felt like the perfect arrangement. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to feel something was off. Small things at first, unseen, almost invisible, like the air just before a storm. I couldn't put my finger on it, but a sense of unease had settled in. It was around the time I started feeling physically weak. At first just tired, and then increasingly ill. I thought I was just burned out, the result of too many late nights at work, the stress of readjusting to life on my own. But the fatigue didn't go away. It only grew worse. I was exhausted to the bone, barely able to get out of bed in the mornings, and when I did, I felt lightheaded and unsteady. I visited doctor after doctor, but nothing concrete came up. I tried everything, different treatments, vitamins, and even alternative medicine. It felt like I was stuck in a body that had betrayed me. Then came the night it all changed. I had woken up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. My limbs felt like lead, and my skin had a sickly, clammy feel to it. I barely had the strength to sit up, but somehow I managed. Sarah had been staying up late in the living room watching TV like she often did. I didn't think anything of it. But this time I noticed something different about her. She was quieter, more distant. "Sarah?" I called weakly, my voice hoarse from dehydration. "Sarah, can you help me?" She turned slowly, her face pale under the dim light. There was something about the way she looked at me that made my heart skip a beat. It was like she had been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with a nervousness I had never noticed before. "I don't know," I mumbled, clutching my chest. "I feel strange, like something's wrong." She gave me a tight smile, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, something cold and calculating. But it was gone in a flash, replaced by her usual soothing tone. "I'll call you an ambulance," she said quickly. "Don't worry, you're just overworked. We'll get you some rest, and you'll feel better." But as she grabbed her phone, I noticed something in her movements. The urgency in her gestures didn't match her calm demeanor. My instincts, honed from years of dealing with my own emotions, told me there was something more beneath the surface. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was being watched, like something was closing in on me. The fear was building, creeping in slowly, and I knew that my body wasn't just sick. It was being attacked from the inside. The days passed, and I became weaker. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, my body too frail to rest properly. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion. It was a sense of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like I could trust Sarah anymore. Her constant smile, her soothing voice, everything about her felt wrong. The breaking point came when I discovered something I wasn't supposed to see. One evening, after feeling unusually weak, I made my way to the bathroom. But before I could reach the door, I heard voices coming from Sarah's room. The door was slightly ajar, and I caught a glimpse of her talking on the phone. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I did. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "She's getting weaker. I think it's almost time." A chill ran through me. She wasn't talking to a doctor. She wasn't talking to anyone concerned about my health. No, it was something far more sinister. I didn't wait for her to finish. My mind was racing. What was she talking about? What did she mean by, "It's almost time"? I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, I confronted Sarah. She seemed unusually nervous, but she quickly tried to cover it up with a warm smile. "Is something wrong, Natalie?" she asked innocently, though I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "Who were you talking to last night?" I asked, my voice steady but shaking inside. "What did you mean by, 'it's almost time'?" Sarah froze. The color drained from her face, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw her mask slip. There was a flash of panic in her eyes, and then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. She took a deep breath and sat down across from me. "Listen, Natalie," she began, her voice trembling. "I never wanted you to find out this way." Before I could respond, she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "You've been sick for months, haven't you? You thought it was just stress, but it wasn't. I've been poisoning you." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. My body went cold and I could barely catch my breath. Poisoning? How? Why? "I never wanted it to go this far," Sarah continued, her voice shaking now. "But I had to. You've been so weak, and I can't do it much longer. You weren't supposed to survive this long, Natalie. I had to make sure Jake would be mine. He's been mine all along, but I need to take him away from you." I couldn't breathe. The woman I trusted, my friend, my rock, had been slowly killing me. Not only that, but she had been planning to take my son, my only child, away from me. Jake had noticed the change in me too, of course, but he had dismissed it. He thought it was just a phase, thought I was overreacting. But now, after hearing Sarah's confession, I knew everything had been orchestrated for months, maybe even longer. I didn't have the strength to confront her any further. My body was failing me. But one thing was clear. I had to protect my son. I called the police, but the call felt distant, like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. Detective Harper arrived soon after, taking Sarah away in handcuffs. She fought them, screaming and pleading, but the evidence was overwhelming. My mind raced with horror as I thought about what could have happened if I hadn't caught on, if I hadn't heard those words. That night, I watched from the window as they pulled her away. The red and blue lights of the squad car flashed in my eyes, but it didn't offer any comfort. Claudia, the woman who had been everything to me, was gone. The one person I had trusted to help raise my son had been poisoning me slowly. Jake and I talked for hours that night, the weight of everything hanging over us. The woman who had once been our rock had nearly destroyed us. My world was darker now, colder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the real horrors weren't always the ones we could see. They could hide behind a smile, behind a kindness that masked the darkest of intentions, and I had nearly lost everything. I never thought moving in with a stranger could feel like the start of something good. But after 6 months of couch surfing and living out of a duffel bag, I didn't care about much else besides having 4 walls, a working lock, and somewhere quiet to sleep. The apartment wasn't perfect, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a weather-worn brick building in the heart of Ashgrove, but it was clean, cheap, and came with a built-in roommate, Natalie. I met her through a listing on a local rental forum. She'd posted a simple ad, "Looking for a quiet, clean female roommate. Must be employed. No drama." I sent a short message with a little about myself, and she replied within an hour. We met at a cafe the next day. She was soft-spoken, polite, and a little distant. Not cold, just reserved. Honestly, that suited me fine. I wasn't looking to make a new best friend, just someone who paid their half and didn't blast music at 2 a.m. A week later, I moved in. The place had character. Hardwood floors that creaked if you stepped wrong, a radiator that clanged like a hammer in the dead of night, and old crown molding that curled like smoke in the corners of the ceiling. Natalie's room was at the end of the hall. Mine was nearer the front with a view of the street and just enough space for a double bed and a dresser. Natalie kept to herself. She worked from home as a freelance editor and rarely left the apartment. Her door stayed closed most of the time, and when we crossed paths in the kitchen or bathroom, she'd smile vaguely and make brief, courteous conversation. I appreciated the distance, but the first strange thing happened the night I unpacked. After organizing my room, I took a long, hot shower to wash the road grime off. The bathroom was narrow but tidy, with black and white tile and an antique clawfoot tub. I pulled the curtain closed before stepping in. Halfway through, I felt it, a shift in the air like someone had opened a window. When I peeked out, the curtain was pulled slightly back. Not much, just enough for a sliver of air to hit my shoulder. I figured I hadn't closed it right. Easy enough to shrug off. The next morning, as I made coffee, I noticed damp footprints on the tile leading from the bathroom toward Natalie's room. They were about my size. I paused. I hadn't been in the bathroom since my shower the night before. "Natalie?" I called. She looked up from the couch, a book open in her lap. "Yeah? Did you take a shower late last night?" She shook her head. "Number Y." I hesitated. "Just saw some wet footprints. Probably mine. Never mind." She gave a polite smile and went back to her book. But little things kept happening. My toothbrush vanished from the holder one morning. I found it later in my nightstand drawer, damp with a strange metallic tang when I used it. One night I came home from work to the sound of the shower running. I knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Natalie?" No answer. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty, steam thick in the air. My name was scrawled into the fog on the mirror, again and again, in different sizes, overlapping. My heart stuttered. "Natalie, seriously?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. She stepped into the doorway behind me, making me jump. "What's wrong?" I pointed at the mirror. "Did you do this?" She blinked. "Do what?" I turned back. The mirror was clean, no writing, no fog, just our reflections. I didn't sleep much that night. I started locking my bedroom door. Every creak made me bolt upright. A few nights later, I woke up to soft whispering. I sat up, listening. The sound was faint, but real. I followed it down the hall, heart pounding. The bathroom door was open a crack, light spilling through. Peering in, I saw Natalie standing at the sink, hands moving in slow circles over the mirror's surface. "Natalie?" I whispered. She didn't turn. "She doesn't know," she murmured. I stepped back. "Know what?" Her head whipped toward me, smile wide and eyes glassy. "You're up late." I couldn't sleep," I stammered. "You should rest," she said softly. "Big day tomorrow." I backed away slowly and locked myself in my room. The next day, while she was out, I searched her room. It felt wrong, but something wasn't right. Her room was oddly empty. No real decorations. But on one wall, hung with surgical precision, were 5 mirrors, all angled slightly inward, facing the center of the room. Her closet held a plastic tub labeled bathroom in Sharpie. Inside were my missing things: my hairbrush, socks, face wash, even a pair of earrings I thought I lost weeks ago. Beneath it, I found a notebook. Every page was covered in my name, over and over, with crude sketches of my face, twisted and off, like a reflection in a broken mirror. Some had long scratches over the eyes. Others were smiling grotesquely. I was still staring when I heard a floorboard creak behind me. Looking for something, I turned. Natalie stood in the doorway, her voice flat. "Why do you have my things?" I asked. "I borrowed them." I tried to keep my voice calm. "You can't do that." Her head tilted. "We share. We're close, remember?" "Number, this isn't sharing, this is obsessive. I think I need to move out." Her smile slipped. "You can't leave. Not when we're finally sinking." I shoved past her and ran to my room, grabbing my phone. No signal. "Natalie, I'm calling the cops," I shouted. She laughed softly. "They won't believe you." I bolted to the front door, jammed, deadbolt frozen. She was behind me again, whispering, "You'll see. We're meant to be one." I ran to the bathroom, thinking maybe I could climb out the window. But something caught my eye, a blinking red light behind the mirror. I leaned in. It wasn't a mirror. It was a two-way glass. A tiny camera was embedded behind it. On the counter sat her tablet. I tapped it. A video feed loaded. Me, sleeping, showering, dressing. My stomach turned. "What the hell is this?" I screamed. Natalie stepped in. Her hair was dyed, now a sandy blonde. My shade. She wore my favorite hoodie. "I've been documenting our harmony," she said. "Your life is so beautiful, Emma. I want it too." I grabbed the tablet and smashed it. The screen cracked. A video clip played anyway. Her practicing my smile, my laugh, whispering my name over and over. I grabbed the knife from the kitchen drawer. "Stay away from me." She advanced slowly. "You can't hurt me. We're the same now." Sirens in the distance. A neighbor must have heard the screams. Natalie lunged. We struggled. The knife clattered to the floor. The front door burst open. Police. "Drop the weapon," one shouted. I raised my hands, crying, "Help me." "She's been spying on me." Natalie fell to her knees, sobbing. "She attacked me. I don't know why." I was stunned. "She's lying. Ask her about the camera, the footage." They didn't believe me at first, but I made them call my mother, confirm I'd never been to Switzerland, where Natalie claimed we met. They checked the mirror, found the camera, found my things, found the files. Natalie, or whatever her real name was taken away. I moved out that week. Sometimes I wonder if she found someone else, another life to imitate, another person to become. And every time I hear a floorboard creak, I check the mirror, just in case someone's watching. I was barely 18 when I made what I can now call the dumbest decision of my life. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out. My name's Josh, and at the time I was just a cocky, stubborn kid from Fort Wayne, Indiana, who thought moving out of my parents' house would solve all my problems. The truth is, I was the problem. I didn't realize that back then, of course. Me and my folks didn't get along for years. Every little thing turned into a fight. Whether it was about me staying out late, smoking weed behind the garage, or skipping community college classes. Especially my dad and me. I blamed them for everything at the time, but now, years later, I can admit I was a hot-headed idiot looking for someone else to blame. Most of my friends were still at home, saving up for school or cars or whatever. I was the only one rushing to leave the nest like the house was on fire. When they caught me with beer or weed, my parents would threaten to kick me out, but if I actually left, they'd call the cops and report me as a runaway. It became a cycle. I'd pack up and storm out, then end up sitting in a police station overnight to learn my lesson. I never did. Not the way they wanted anyway. So when I turned 18, officially an adult, finally able to make my own mistakes, I was done with the threats, the rules, the lectures. I didn't have much saved up, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. and I didn't know anyone willing to split an apartment, so I took matters into my own hands. I turned to Craigslist. It was the sketchiest decision I could have made, but I was desperate. I found this listing for a small one-bedroom in the south side of the city. It wasn't exactly in the best neighborhood, but the price, $475 a month, was too good to ignore. I figured it was some old lady's spare guest house or a converted basement. I was willing to deal with some quirks if it meant freedom. I messaged the poster someone named Cynthia. She didn't answer my call, but texted me back saying she was free that evening if I wanted to see the place. I should have listened to my gut the minute I saw the house. It was this squat little ranch-style house tucked behind a row of trees, the paint on the siding peeling off in strips. The front porch light flickered like it had been dying for months. Still, I told myself not to judge a book by its cover. Cynthia answered the door with this wide, forced smile. She was older, mid-60s maybe, with greasy gray hair pulled into a tight bun and deep, permanent frown lines that stayed even when she smiled. She talked fast, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed a dozen times. "It's all yours, sweetheart. I just need first month and a small deposit and you can move in tomorrow," she told me, barely letting me look around. I asked if there was a lease or paperwork. She brushed it off. "We're keeping it simple. Cash is king, honey." Against every shred of common sense I had left, I paid her. I had this cocky little voice in my head telling me I was grown, that I could handle anything. That voice was dead wrong. The next day, I pulled up around 8 p.m. after grabbing the rest of my junk from my parents' house. I noticed Cynthia's old blue car still parked in the driveway. Weird, but maybe she hadn't left yet. When I walked inside, my stomach dropped. She was sitting in the living room, my living room now, watching some old black and white TV show on a grainy box TV. What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't even look at me. "I'm staying here a few days until I get things sorted," she mumbled. That wasn't the deal. There was never a mention of roommates, especially not her. I told her that, and she just smiled like I was the one acting crazy. "It's only temporary, honey. Don't be difficult." Part of me wanted to throw a fit, but another part of me, the part that was tired, overwhelmed, and still high off the freedom of finally being on my own, told me to let it go. She's an old lady, I thought. What's the worst that can happen? I locked my bedroom door that night, though, just in case. I wish I had trusted my gut sooner. I woke up around midnight to this old-timey music playing from the living room. Some war-era tune I didn't recognize. I groaned, pulled on a hoodie, and cracked my door open. "Hey, could you turn that down? I'm trying to sleep," I said. Cynthia was just sitting there staring at the static-filled TV, not even acknowledging me until I repeated myself. She finally turned the music down a little but didn't say a word. I went back to bed, telling myself she was just some lonely old weirdo. But around 2 a.m., I woke up again, this time to a knock. It was soft at first, barely audible over the muffled music still playing outside. I sat up, annoyed. "What?" I called out. She didn't answer right away, and then, in this soft, sing-song voice, she said, "Danny, honey, dinner's almost ready. Come eat, sweetheart." I froze. My name's not Danny. Not even close. I stayed quiet, hoping she'd go away. But instead, the knocking turned violent, fists slamming into the door, shaking it in the frame. "Open this door, Danny. Open it now, before I come in there and show you what happens to naughty boys." I shoved my dresser in front of the door, heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to throw up. I could hear her breathing on the other side, ragged and angry. I opened the window, jumped out barefoot into the freezing Indiana night, and ran for my truck. I peeled out of the driveway and didn't look back, not once. I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot that night, shaking like a leaf. 2 weeks later, I found out the truth from a buddy's older brother who worked in the county records office. Cynthia's real name wasn't even Cynthia. Her name was Eileen Parker. She used fake names to rent out places, but what really twisted my guts was what I learned next. Her son, Daniel Parker, went missing 2 years ago. His body was found buried in the backyard of that same house, poisoned. She was arrested a week after I fled, caught wandering the streets downtown, screaming at random men, calling them Danny. The police told the media she was delusional, mentally unstable, and possibly in the early stages of dementia. But me? I think it was more than that. I think she knew what she was doing, and I think if I had stayed in that house one more night, I'd be in that backyard next to her son. Even now, 5 years later, I get chills when I hear old-timey music on the radio. Sometimes I wonder if I was just a stand-in for Danny, or if she was planning to recreate what she did to him all over again. I'll never know, and I don't want to. I grabbed my car keys with trembling hands, backing away from the door as I kept hearing her whisper from the other side. "Don't be a bad son, Danny. Don't make Mama angry. You know what happens when you make me angry, right?" Her voice cracked mid-sentence, switching from a high-pitched sweetness to a guttural growl. I felt my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly, carefully slid open the window in my room. The old, stiff frame screeched as it moved, and I froze, listening if she had heard me. Silence. But then, loud thuds on the door again. I said, "Open the door, Danny. Now." That was it for me. I climbed out of the window and fell hard on the gravel below, scraping my palms and knees. I didn't even feel the pain. I sprinted to my car, parked down the street. Something I had thought annoying earlier was now a blessing. Fumbling with the keys, I finally got inside and locked the doors. I started the car and peeled out of the neighborhood, my hands sweaty and shaky on the steering wheel. I drove straight to the nearest 24-hour gas station and sat there under the harsh fluorescent lights for almost an hour, trying to make sense of what the hell had just happened. My brain refused to process it. It was like my body was there, but my mind was stuck inside that bedroom. I called the police, but when they arrived at the house, she was gone. The house was empty, like she vanished into thin air. I told them everything, but since there was no paperwork, no lease, no proof I even lived there, the officers treated me like some dumb kid who fell for a scam. They didn't take me seriously. They told me to stay away from the house, and if I saw her again, call them. That was it. For weeks after, I slept in my car, scared to go back to my parents' house out of pride, but even more scared of trusting anyone again. I became paranoid of strangers, of people who smiled too long, of every Craigslist post, every face on the street. I developed a nasty habit of double-checking every lock, every door, every window. Months later, I learned through a guy at the gas station that the woman, real name Margaret Price, had been arrested in another state. She was found squatting in an abandoned property. According to the news, they found the remains of her son buried in the crawl space of that same house I had tried to rent. His name was Daniel Price. It made me sick. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to make me take her dead son's place. The detective I later contacted said something that still haunts me today. People like her don't just stop after one victim. To this day, I have nightmares of her voice outside my door. Sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m. to some distant knocking sound in my apartment, my first instinct is still to look under the bed, check the closet, and make sure the windows are locked tight. Even though she's in prison now, I don't think I'll ever feel fully safe again. That night changed me. Not with some horror movie climax, not with blood and gore, but with a kind of terror that sinks into your skin and never leaves. A kind of fear you can't wash off. And sometimes, I still hear her whispering in my dreams. "Danny, dinner's almost ready. You don't want to upset Mama." I never went back to that side of town. I never used Craigslist for housing again. I eventually patched things up with my parents, but the paranoia stayed. Therapy helped a little, but some things stick with you for life. And if there's one thing I learned, never trust a stranger who offers you a home that seems too good to be true. because sometimes it is.